For the first update of 2025, the Tier 8 Pan Asian cruiser Sejong received two buffs. Both of them, I'd say, fairly minor. First was a small buff to its base concealment. It was reduced by about zero point 0.4 kilometers. Second buff was to its HP pool, which previously was, I think, 32,000. It's now 35,000. So we've got a little bit better concealment and a little bit better detectability. I don't know that the ship really needed either of those two buffs. I think last time I featured it, I might have said it's one of the most toxic ships in the game to try to push into. And that still holds true today. It was true before the buff, it's certainly true now. The reason for that doesn't really have to do with the hull or the concealment necessarily. Although the concealment is good, we've got it down to 9.1 kilometers, and that's using only the concealment mod and Mikawa as an inspiration, plus the skill on the Pan-Asian Cruiser Commander, which reduces the concealment a little bit more. If you wanted to spec fully into it and use Swirsky as a second inspiration, with all those things still being true, then you'd get 8.7 kilometer concealment, and that may be best in class at Tier 8. Not 100% sure on that. So, concealment is nice because the main draw of this ship is not the main battery guns, in spite of the fact that it's an Atlanta class cruiser, or something close to that. It does have 12 main battery guns, 127 millimeters, but they don't reload quite as quickly as you might expect. I think we've got a 4.5 second reload time with the main battery reload mod in the 4 slot. You could change that out, though, for the torpedoes, because it's the torpedoes here, as you can see, that are the main bread and butter of this ship. The power that this thing has for launching torpedoes is probably unparalleled by cruisers in this game. You could almost think of them as the main armament. It's got 2 sets of 8 on either side of the ship for a total of 16 torpedoes, but then it's got the torpedo reload booster, which you can deploy and get, 32 torpedoes in the water at the exact same time. And of course, these aren't any old torpedoes. You see there, they hit the Michelangelo, I believe, for 28,000. These aren't your run-of-the-mill torps. These are deep-water Pan-Asian torps, which are perhaps some of the scariest torps in the entire game because they're so concealed. You don't see them until they're right on top of your forehead, and by that time, you might have about 1 second's worth of reaction time. They'll hit you, and then they'll damage you really badly. We haven't shot our main battery guns once until now, and we've racked up 54,000 damage in just the opening, 3 minutes of this game. The torpedo power on here is tremendous. If you've got one of these things that is unspotted on a flank, and you have no way of revealing it by way of destroyer spotting or radar cruiser or something like that, and you try to push into the flank that this thing occupies, you can expect a lot of torpedoes to come your way. The only downside to the torpedo power is that these are deep waters, so they cannot hit destroyers, but they have no problem damaging cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers. And once again, people just don't see them coming. There goes the Schroeder as our first kill of the game. We take a huge hit from Yamato back there. Lucky to not be dev struck. I suppose the HP increase is maybe helping us out there just a little bit. Even without it, though, we wouldn't have been sunk by that shot, so it's not a game changer in this particular scenario. Now that we've demolished a lot of the HP on this flank and sunk one ship, getting 87,000 damage with 7 torpedo hits and only 27 shell hits, looks like we're going to have to abandon this flank a little bit and go more toward the center. We've got torpedoes out on Michelangelo's position, but they're not led quite well enough. He's a very fast cruiser, and he's going to be able to mostly avoid them. So now we're going to sail into the center of the map. We know that the only enemy destroyer on the team was last spotted in the center, and I think he's still occupying it, because as you can see, the points count for the blue team is static. 513, although we do have the center capped. Reason we're not getting points from it is because that DD is still there. And so I was initially making my way back toward the center because this flank seemed clear aside from Michelangelo, thinking maybe if the enemy DD got spotted, I would be able to use the main battery firepower to deal with that, at least a little bit. Michelangelo does miss the torpedoes. He is sailing away, he's smoked up. The rest of his team is unspotted. They appear to be clustered up near that collection of islands there. Somebody radars and gets them spotted. Shimakaze is about 13 kilometers away. He's got no HP, takes a big hit from one of our teammates. I don't think our guns are going to be too effective at this range. They don't even hit before the Shima goes down. And that just leaves a number of cruisers and 2 battleships left, almost all of whom, aside from 1 cruiser on the complete other side of the map, are concentrated in this little corner here. Not exactly doing the best job of, spreading out, acquiring different angles, and the like. So the goal for the rest of this match, essentially, is to find a position from which we can continue to launch all these fishes into the water. Also, it should be noted now that the epicenter is clear, and so we are taking the central ring between the outer ring and the center of the epicenter, which is going to give us 2 caps. That is a recipe for the enemy's failure. The capture progress, or the capture points that you get when you capture the majority of the epicenter, or all of it, is pretty tremendous. I think it's maybe a little bit more than your typical domination mode, and the game tends to snowball out of control once one team gains firm control of the epicenter. If the other team is playing on the outside of it, like the red team is, then we've got a recipe for a blowout. And normally I don't really like to show blowouts too much on the YouTube because, well, they're not that interesting to watch. But I wanted to show you this game just because so many torpedoes are involved. You can use them in so many different ways because they are so numerous. You can use them to actually aim at ships, as we were doing earlier, or you can use them to plug up a little bit of gap control right there. We've got torpedoes going through that gap. I don't know if they're actually going to make contact, but if the enemy team is going to push from their position, they're either going to push through the island right there where the Brest and Yamato are, or they're going to come around this island here and push into the torpedoes that we're launching in the gap. I think that first set there, does it have the juice to actually hit Michelangelo? There's no way they're spotted. He's not running sonar. We know that because he used smoke earlier. And it looks like they are going to make contact. In fact, they get us our 2nd kill of the game, and we go over 100,000 damage now. 115,000 in total. We've also got the reload booster ready to go. We can deploy that, launch some more torpedoes into the gap, and then we can perform the old classic spin to win maneuver, which it's sort of like having 2 torpedo reload boosters, really, if you think about it. You launch them off one side, then you launch them off the other, and then you can deploy the torpedo reload booster. It's almost like having 2. It's kind of honestly ridiculous how much torpedo firepower this thing has. It may be the only cruiser in the game where the torpedoes really are the primary armament rather than the main battery guns. Maybe there's some other cruisers where you would primarily use the torpedoes. The Brisbane comes to mind, considering it's a Minotaur hull without smoke, if you play it with radar, which I think you should. And it's got great concealment and 13.5 kilometer pan-European torpedoes. I think these ones also range out to the same 13.5, but they're a little bit different from pan-European torpedoes, and I would say a little bit more powerful. Literally, the only downside is they cannot do damage to enemy destroyers. And of course, we've got more torpedoes in the water heading toward Montana. Looks like at least one is going to hit, and you can see that they do a respectable, healthy amount of damage when they do make contact. That Montana pushing in stands no chance. We could maybe fire our main battery guns at him, but I don't really see the value in doing that and getting ourselves spotted. He goes down, we get a fisting ribbon. Fair enough. That just leaves Brest and what else? Another cruiser who's still, I think, on the complete other side of the map, or at least he's closer to the enemy spawn and not even within visual range of us. Brest is going to go down, focused by the rest of our team. Yamato's on no HP. And then that last cruiser out there, he might be able to kite away for a time, but there's no hope in winning this game, especially once we clear the Yamato and the Brest out of the epicenter. That's going to leave it free of red ships, and that's going to mean we're going to secure the outer ring, which will put all of the rings together and give us a huge income of points. In fact, if we sink these guys, that might just be it for this match. So we finish with 160,000 damage done, the vast majority of that coming from 11 torpedo hits, only 89 shell hits, 2 fires, 7 floods though. The torpedoes really are the main armament here. The guns are something that you use, I suppose, after you launch the torpedoes from the safety of the smoke screen in order to light fires and get perma-fires after ships have used their DCP to stop the flooding. It's just a very difficult ship to push into. It can hold down a flank practically on its own with all the torpedo firepower it has, but the key here is that it's really only effective when stuff is pushing into it. If you find yourself having to push into other people, you'll see it's less effective. We finish with a respectable 2600 base XP. Kleber and another ship do better than us, which is fine. But I think this video just demonstrates the incredible torpedo power of the Sejong. It had this before the buff, so I'm not sure the buff was necessary, but I suppose we can say the ship is a little bit more survivable now, which perhaps makes it even more of a threat. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.